This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, and my special guest for the intro tonight is Simon Slater.
Hello.
Simon, what you doing?
Well, I'm recording this podcast and cooking some tomato sauce.
One of your many talents that maybe not many people know is you are a fantastic chef.
Well, it's easy if you get the Essentials of Italian Cooking by Marcella Hazan. That's
Well, I don't think that Toralina May Fields, who was taken into custody last week in Kentucky, who found the body of her 68-year-old mother, Trudy, lying in the backyard, who's now accused of not only shooting her mother in the head, stabbing her several times before decapitating her, dismembering her, eviscerating her mother's corpse, and then placing head, hands, feet, and forearms in a pot in the oven and heating them until they were charred.
Do you know what recipe she was following?
I'm going to have to investigate that, but just the looks of her alone was probably wasn't the first time she ate something nasty. But her cousin said, "Look, oh, she's just a little girl with classic blonde curls playing the piano. She was an amazing piano player. She grew up with chickens and horses. She was a country girl." Well, that was then. She was a member of the track team, the field team. The Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America said she was a big flirt. Anyway, she was celebrated until she did this, which is pretty horrific, I'd say.
Yeah, I wonder if she was a member of the Cannibal Club.
I'm not sure, but she is now, that's for sure. Now, Simon, you're kind of an expert in all things phallic. Rather an expert in your own phallus.
Yeah, I love my
I hate to
tomato.
brag about you, but I'm just saying, I've heard word. But could you imagine, or do you even know what triphalia is?
Is that where your
No.
dick is so big that you just trip all over yourself?
Well, no, it's even worse than that. A British man has discovered to have three penises,
Oh, I
and
thought
he's
that
only
was
the second.
triphallitirata.
There we go. You know what it is. I guess it's something we all dream about. Nightmares. Anyway, a man from Birmingham was born with three of them. Only the second person, at least, to admit having it, and only one of the three are functional. So the other two, which are attached within the skin of the scrotal sac, inside and next to the testicles. The thing is, he's 78 years old. It was only discovered after he donated his body to science upon his death.
So did he think, I mean, if they were in his scrotal sac, wasn't he worried he had like testicular cancer?
Well, I mean, maybe dementia set in first. I don't know. It's an extremely rare defect, and especially, I guess, when they're found buried in your nutsack. But they also found that the third penis, I don't know how they told the second from the third, had different anatomical features to the first functional one. And the second one, oh, the second one was in the scrotal sac. So, uh, not a good time had by anybody, I don't think.
If you circumcise just one of your penises, does that make you uncircumcised or circumcised?
Semi circumcised.
Semi-circumcised. Okay, that works.
I mean, a fate worse than I don't know what, but there we go. Anyway, things are just getting. Speaking about balls, as we sometimes do, two Sydney beaches had to close after hundreds of black golf ball sized spheres washed ashore. They have no idea what it is. Hundreds of black golf ball sized spheres, tarry, gooey, washed on the shores, and the beaches had to be closed. They don't have no idea what's going on with that. Hundreds of them, as a matter of fact.
A lot.
Yeah, well, the beach is no longer as safe as it once was. Just ask anybody in Florida. That tragedy ongoing will not be cured immediately. I don't know what else to say to that. I mean, we're in for a rough ride with climate change. Nothing's going to change the climate from changing at this point if we carry on as we are. So just batten down the hatches. One more
No,
can
well, that was the my dad was watching the news the other day and he sent him into a rage because they were interviewing this guy down in Florida when the first hurricane hit this year. They asked him, his house was completely destroyed, and they go, well, are you going to rebuild your house? He goes, of course I'm going to rebuild my house. That was like a once in a 100-year hurricane.
Oh,
And then, of course, what, a week later, he gets hit again. I wonder if that's changed his views any.
Well, they claim that, since in about the past 20 years, like 3 million, that's not that many when there's 350 million people. 3 million people have moved out of flood zones, and more are going to start moving out just because insurance isn't going to cover it. It's not going to stop. But where's higher ground? And then on higher ground, you might have the wildfire. So what are you going to do?
Yeah. So it's an interesting problem. I mean, I know a friend of mine who lives in California. He's originally from Chicago, so he drove one summer back from California to Chicago, and everywhere he stopped, there was this fear of people from California. They're like, "You're not going to live here, are you? We don't want Californians in this town."
As if anybody is originally from anywhere who lives in this country,
right? But the idea of these climate migrants, they're going to
right. Oh, yeah. Oh, well,
they're not going to be well received in a lot of places. Is the message that I was.
Well,
getting.
That's just too bad for the people that are safe and sound wherever they think they are, because there's all kinds of problems we're going to continue to experience. Fortunately, we haven't been struck with anything for a while here, so let's just count ourselves lucky.
I know, it's nice. Yeah.
Well, and lucky we are to have Sim Cain on the show today, who's played with any number of people, which we will discuss. And here we are, and here we go. And this is once again the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Simon Slater for the intro, soon to be followed by Timothy Dahl. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch in Brooklyn, Tim Dahl in Barcelona, and Sim Cain in Trenton. As always, we are multi-city, multinational, multi-dimensional. And Sim Cain, let's get to you.
All right.
You have drummed with from hardcore pulsating rock with like Henry Rollins or Greg Ginn and gone all the way through to John Zorn and Marc Ribot, but also then to blues, what a transition, and then also taking your unique and propulsive style to various other countries. So welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You ain't stopping, and that's what we like. We like people that just will not stop, will not give up. And then eventually, in a couple of weeks, you'll be playing with Mr. Timothy Seymour Dahl himself.
Yep.
Yes, and I'll be more awake then, but that's part of the road experience, as both of you know. Let's start at the beginning.
First of all, Timothy, I've never seen you eat fuzzy even while in bed. So I mean your energy usually dominates even in your sleep. I've heard you be rocking. No, so
that's not what I'm getting at. That can be the case. So you were born in London, correct?
I was born in London, yeah.
And you moved to the States at what age?
Just shy of 4 years old.
Okay, so you're basically American.
Yeah,
and
relatively American.
And do you have family still in England? You go back?
I have family in England, and my father was Canadian, so I have some family in Canada too.
So was mine. I knew we were related.
And did they move to Trenton? Is that where they moved?
No, we first moved to Princeton, New Jersey, but it's a true immigrant story because we came by boat. And
whoa!
What century was that in?
Old school.
1967, I think it was.
Wow. Do you remember it as like a 3-4-year-old?
No.
I mean,
sorry?
Was it Ellis Island? Was the whole New York going by Coney Island, and that's your first impression story? Or
I feel like I have a memory of seeing the New York skyline at dark when we were coming in, but I don't remember actually getting off the boat, so I couldn't tell you.
Sure.
Was the reason to come by boat to move all the stuff, or just
no? I think it may have been a delayed honeymoon or something for my parents. I'm not really sure, and neither of them are here to ask anymore. So,
can you imagine at this point traveling by boat? No, I mean, 1-minute ferry, an hour ferry across the Atlantic. Hell to the no. You kind of look like a captain who could be on Deadliest Catch right now. My favorite shows.
I do remember seasickness being part of the boat package.
Can only imagine.
5 days? 5 days? What was it?
I think it was 5. I think it was 5. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Sim, there's this what's her name? I feel bad. I can't remember her name. This vocalist from Brazil who lives in Denmark. But I've known some kind of a little more vivacious, adventurous types who will start their tour on a boat. So in other words, there are cargo options where you have like 5 days.
Don't have the time
and you have the internet, and you're out there and you start that way. And I don't know, it's still an option.
It reminds me of once Tim and I and a few others were on a ferry, and only Tim and I would go out to the deck because the wind was so ferocious. I love wind. We were almost blown back, not sucked in, which was fine. But what do you think in all your years, decades really of traveling, Sim? What might be one of the most dangerous encounters in a van, in a car, on a plane, on a train, in a boat?
I'm sure there's been more than, I've probably forgotten more than I remember, but I do remember particularly hair-raising bus ride from to Sao Paulo from Rio de Janeiro.
That sounds about right. Sounds about right.
And it was one of these huge like transit buses, but you know, only about 12 of us on it or something. But it was like careening down these tiny mountainside roads. You really felt like you were leaning out over the side of a cliff, and that was pretty scary.
I've been in situations like that. Not only is it like that, but they'll also decide to pass a car around an edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
And what? What's that? Why?
Yeah.
Do you recall some kind of snowbound escapade in our van somewhere in Switzerland or something where the band was threatened by? Do you remember this?
Me?
Drawing a blank, you see, because we've had so many experiences traveling, so many hectic ones, and let's face it, traveling is almost the worst part of touring.
It can kill you, as it's killed many musicians.
Sure.
Bessie Smith, or the list goes on.
Almost killed him. You were almost killed in a touring road accident.
I was, and I'm on the road now. You don't want to talk about it. But going back to Sim, so you end up in the States. When do you start playing music, and were the drums the first instrument that you played?
Drums were the first instrument. Both of my grandfathers were drummers.
Wow.
Cool.
And I only met one of them, and they never met each other since one was in Canada.
One was Canadian.
Whoa!
And one was British.
Yeah, was Scottish, yeah.
Scottish.
Yeah.
That would have been quite a family trio.
Well, we're all full-blood Scots pretty much anyway. So,
well, Scots and Canadians produce many historic white rhythm section players. That's for sure. I mean, with all sincerity.
Cain is my middle name, and my last name is actually McDonald. So, and that's from my father's, the Canadian side of the family.
So how old were you when the drumming, flowed through your blood? So like, I have to play the drums like Grandpa.
I was pretty much like, I just really, really wanted to do it. I got my first pair of sticks at 5, and then a Corvette's drum, like toy-ish drum kit at my 6th birthday. And eventually my buddy's older brother, when he was in high school, he had like a Sears kit that he wanted to get rid of. And so my buddy said, well, give it to Sim. And I just started playing obsessively from about the age of 12 at that point.
Well, and the thing is, drums are kind of a hard instrument for parents to agree to. But since your parents both had drummer dads, I mean, that probably made it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Oh, God, who wants to hear a 6-year-old banging on the drums?
Lydia, we don't know the story. We don't know the story. It could have been like, oh, no.
There's part of that. But
I mean, drummers have a certain vibe. I'm a bass player, so I know certain things about drummers, and there are characteristics of drummers that are pretty badass, but can also be a little dangerous. Do you ever go in the danger zone on the road outside of music?
I've spent many years of recklessness.
Another reason you're on the show. Another reason we've invited you onto this show. I mean, look, you toured with the Rollins Band, which had to be, I know that wasn't maybe the first thing you did, but first notable thing. That must have had, because for some reason at that period in music at that time, post even Black Flag, there was just a lot of agitation, a lot of controversy, which is kind of, it just proves, the stupidity of teenage boys, but there must have been a lot of headache.
A lot of dumb jocks took up punk rock.
Right.
And
that was the time.
Yeah, and so the whole stage diving thing was more like jocks at the swimming pool showing off to their friends rather than, blurring the lines between performance and listeners. So that
No,
was
no,
good.
Sim.
Yeah.
But let me ask you about this because, and of course, I'm not even trying to paint anyone in a corner here, but you think part of Rollins' persona also allowed that to happen at the time with his kind of muscle physique and his kind of like tough guy shit?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. However, we were all in bare feet, so we didn't really want you to climb on stage and stand on our feet.
Sim, I have to, one of my favorite, I don't know if you were in the band at this time, but one of my favorite heckling takedowns was when I opened for the Rollins Band. I think it was in Cincinnati or Cleveland.
It was
And
it was the Metro in Chicago.
okay. Well, I'm not sure if that's the one, but I remember this. Somebody said, "Show me your tits," which I did because I did. And then I had a mag light, and I said, "Show me your dick." And some members of the Rollins Band pulled the guy's pants down and said, "I said that's why I call it a mag light. I need a magnifying glass to see it. No more heckling." Why the fuck was I doing spoken word to open for the Rollins Band? It was ridiculous. I don't know if that's the one you also remember.
Yeah,
or
it was made sense. It made sense at the time, and you did several shows with us, and then you came out and sang with us.
I don't remember that at all.
Oh, here come the skeletons. You and Henry sang "Casey and the Sunshine Band." That's the way I like it. Over.
Oh God, I wish I heard that.
We used to have an encore song that was a cover of a Lou Reed song, "Move Right In," and it became like this huge extended jam. We play it for half an hour, 40 minutes, and it was sort of medley, like we go through the motifs and riffs that we could think of. So somehow we ended up with "That's the way I like it."
I mean, I only remember the one gig. So you say there was more. I believe I was there, but my brain hurt like a warehouse. There's no room left to spare. That's Bowie, not me. But the memory bank's full of sandy silt. Like the hurricane could have blown away half my memories. But well, that sounds amazing. It must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have a distinct memory of you and I stretching in the dressing room before I think the Metro.
We were stretching.
Well, I was stretching, because I otherwise I'd get back pains. And then you were pontificating on your ideas of the evil patriarchy of gynecology.
Well, come on. I mean, forever. My main theme. Hello.
That's one of your go-tos.
Well, get the fucking Republicans out of my uterus. Abort the Supreme Court. It's one of my mantras.
Here.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those great memories.
So there were different members. Was Melvin in the band at that point?
No, he wasn't. It was pre-Melvin.
Okay. All right.
How did
you get the gig? How did you get the gig with Rollins?
Well, Andrew, the bass player, the original bass player, and I were both from this area, New Jersey. And I'll try and condense the story. Black Flag was looking for a new bass player. Andrew sent the records that we were in a band called Regressive Aid, another one called Scornflakes. So he sent them those records to Greg Ginn. And the shorter story is they didn't take him as a bass player in Black Flag, but Ginn called Andrew and said, "Do you and whoever played drums on that record want to start a band with me?" So we joined Gone as a instrumental trio and did the whole.
How long did that last? How long? What was the years of Gone with Greg Ginn?
It was all 86 because we did 7 months with Black Flag and then another 3 on our own. So we were out for 10 months that year, and we were playing. We had a smaller but equally as loud drum setup that we played in record stores every day. So we would play from 1 to 3 sets a day, and I computed that we played over 600 sets in '86.
What's amazing about that is not only the stamina of youth, but that there would be no way to do that many fucking shows now, no matter where you went. I mean, and this is pre-internet.
Yeah.
This is the miraculousness of people that have lasted as long as we have is how we even toured before the internet, because we did.
Yeah.
I mean, that many shows, you can't even imagine it now. There's no place, no way. No. Unfortunately, there's not that many shows.
Mind you, sometimes we'd pull up to a record store and there would be no flyer, no poster, and they would say, who are you? And then we'd say, well, we're supposed to play here this afternoon. And they would say, well, who booked that? And we'd say, oh, some guy named Fred. And they were like, oh, he's not in today. And then say, well, can we set up anyway? And they'd be like, no, I guess so. So we played
and then you really bang it out. And Probably half the store would be horrified and half would be in complete spasms of joy.
If anyone was there.
Well, the thing is, we, with all formative touring experiences, I mean, unless you just win the lottery or in some arena thing, which I think kind of sucks in its own way, if you're not making all the money. And but we're talking about, wow, you could do 10 months, but those are mostly one-nighters, right?
Yeah.
Because just a generation before that,
I live a lot of driving.
with R&B and big band and even like big band rock, or you'd have residencies. Like when I talk to like sax players and stuff, and they'd be going down the East Coast and they'd be in a hotel for a week or 2 weeks. And there'd be a band, and then they go on to the next town. And so it just keeps on eroding down.
No.
It was much better for the libido back then too.
You didn't need Viagra when you were in your early 20s. Let's face facts.
Anyway,
I'm not saying you need it now. I'm just saying.
The closest we ever got to that was touring Australia, because the cities there are so far apart that you would often do 2 or 3 days in a row before you moved on. But that was super fun.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been to Australia a few times. I was there recently, like a year ago. I was one of my favorite places to go and tour because of that fact that you can do 2 or 3 shows in one city, different kinds of venue, and the people are there, and it's just, it's really great. It's a really great place that had a lot of great music come out of there.
You know, it was also Rollins Band's largest live audience.
Really?
Yeah, the booking agent over there had really cultivated us really well. It was the first place we ever toured with full production, with PA and all that kind of stuff. So,
I mean, but was that okay? I mean, so you have better consistency, but it ends up being the same amount of money because you have a bigger overhead, right? Or is it better money? Or you don't know? You're a hired gun.
Yeah, well, you know, I got the same money, but
exactly.
And I know that at some points, I mean, I think that's what kind of led to the dissolving of the band the first time, was that Henry was starting to get paid more to speak than the band was getting paid to do concerts.
Well, I
have to give him credit for no longer doing music, because I think he made his mark in music. And I think that he has diversified with photography, with the record reviews, with the books about records, with his fanatics thing. I mean, he's, you know, too many people do the same album over and over again, and that can lead to your legacy or your downfall. And I think he knew when to get out of music.
Well, I mean, I think in some ways it speaks volumes about him. How do I put this gently? How much of a musician he really was, because, you know, he...
and more people should realize how little of a musician they are and just do what they do correctly and then step aside.
Fair enough. Or you can reinvent, but, you know.
Well, not everybody's, you know, like we are, musical schizophrenic.
No, but Sim, I appreciate that point, because, and Quincy Jones talks about this, like, you know, through basically Frank Sinatra, when the industry decided to focus on the lead singer basically being... Speak
about a one-trick wonder, Frank
Sinatra. But being the star,
hey.
even Lydia brings this up about herself, you know, a band was an avenue to present themselves as something, what they are, a performer, a writer, a character. And so that doesn't necessarily mean you're the ratio of musicianship to what that other thing is. It could be lower in that equation, and that's not a qualitative point.
I'm a musical schizophrenic. I'm a conceptualist. I have a concept of music, and I find the people that can bring that to fruition. I don't have one idea about what my music should be. I never did. And some people have a very set idea, and that's why I think Rollins was wise in doing what he did, and then like that's his idea, and that's enough.
Well, he did his idea well.
Exactly, and then that's enough. I wish more people had that same attitude.
As a drummer, as a musician, do you tend to listen? I don't even know how much music you even listen to, but do you tend to favor listening to instrumental music or lead singer oriented music in general?
Or no music in general.
Oh yeah, or no music.
You know, I don't listen to one more than the other, but certainly my taste do morph over time. You know, there's things that really used to excite me years ago that now just seem a bit silly to me now. You know.
Yeah, fair.
But
I feel that way about most of Tim's party selections. Kind of silly, but he has great taste in music otherwise.
Thanks.
Oh, by the way,
correcting that.
By the way, I saw Frank Sinatra, his 75th birthday concert at the Meadowlands whilst on acid, and that was really amazing.
Must have been better on acid.
Oh, it was fantastic.
Did Don Rickles open?
No, Stephen Eady.
Oh,
Stephen
wow.
Eady
Stephen
Gourmet.
Eady. Oh my! So how does Stephen Eady translate to a football stadium? How does that work?
No, it was an arena, actually, not a football stadium.
But even so,
the quietest concert I'd ever been in, bar none. And Liza,
maybe your brain was louder on the acid than Frank was with his one note, monotone, horrible presentation.
What was more psychedelic on acid, Frank Sinatra or Stephen Eady? I would think Stephen Eady would be more psychedelic.
I don't know if it had kicked all the way in by then, but the whole evening was fabulous. And then Liza came up and did New York with Frank at the end. That was a real pepper.
That is
were you laughing?
Were you
laughing at that point, or crying, or what was going on when you're on acid?
We were going full bore for all the modern nightclub stuff. Frank at one point was like, I just want to say this is the best damn birthday I've ever had. And
hopefully his last as well.
My buddy Andrew and I looked at each other and went, I believe that.
I've never been to a concert at a place as big as the Meadowlands. The biggest place I was ever at was for wrestling. That was Madison Square Garden. But, I'm mainly, especially coming up as a youngster, going to a lot of concerts. It would be more theater size or small auditoriums. I cannot stand the idea of some place that, I was at the Barclays Center once and I will never go back. It was just so atrocious. I couldn't bear it. Because I want the intimate experience.
Yeah, of course.
I've noticed some of the best performers can draw you in if you're in an arena and make it feel intimate. If you if you don't stare at the jumbotron,
Right. Well, but Sim,
when you want to feel intimate, let me know, honey. I'll tell you what intimacy is all about.
Whoa. Well, the thing is, though, the arena, the acoustics are so bad. You better know
my
that
shirt goes down. You pull yours up.
You better know that material because it's abstraction at that point.
Yeah.
If you don't know it, you kind of don't even know what the fuck you're listening to. I mean, unless you're really close.
Yeah, that's true.
No, when you played, did you play Lollapalooza? Did you do the big?
Yeah.
And was that almost pantomiming? How good were the monitors? What were you just kind of just going muscle memory or?
No, you could really hear
solid.
Yes, totally solid. Yeah, and all the bands were really good on that tour. Even Jane's Addiction, they had some almost proggy shit, some proggy stuff that they only a band like them can pull off.
Who else was on that? What year was that, and who was L7 on that tour?
No, it was the very first one.
Living Color.
Yeah, it was. We played, then the Butthole Surfers.
Oh, amazing!
And then Ice-T came out and did his Body Count thing. And then 9 Inch Nails. And then Living Color, then Susie and the Banshees, and then Jane's Addiction. And I would play
pretty stellar for that period.
Yeah, it really was a game changer because up until then, rock radio in this country was hair metal bands, and I saw, personally witnessed great suits from radio stations, their jaws dropping into their laps when 30,000 kids were chanting "fuck Bon Jovi" and stuff like that. They were like, where did this audience come from? And then
they're waiting for it. Waiting for it.
That fall, the Nirvana album dropped, and it was all over at that point.
Yeah, it was critical mass. I remember because I'm younger and I was a teenager when that happened, and some of those bands I like more than others. I'm not going to name them, but it was kind of impressive that was pulled off, to be honest, because that was a very unexpected.
Well, especially what you consider are at these festivals on this day and age, which is just pathetic, overproduced tools, goes to Disney, child stars, being overworked, producing the shittiest music you've ever heard in your life. I mean, that's the festivals now, pretty much.
Seems, but this was my favorite summer. I really loved it.
But with that said,
what's that?
92, 91.
91.
So but Sim, in order for it to have to be a lower common denominator by bringing in wider audiences, going back to your original point, which was there's more frat boys at that point, guaranteed, right? I mean, there's more meatheads, right? I mean, you can't pick your audience, but that's going to happen.
You know, I was with a friend at a Soundgarden show once, and I was like, wow, they seem to have particularly the bass player seems to have the most contentious relationship with his audience. And my friend at the time said, well, it's just the law of averages. The larger you get, the stupider your audience becomes.
Yeah. Well, Cliff Martinez was on the podcast, and he said that because he played with Beefheart, but then he also played with all those people. And his line was, the higher the elevation, the lighter the irrigation. And basically you want to go
and this
fog, atonal, avant-garde. Well, guess what? You're going to have a smaller audience, whether you like it or not. I mean, it's just going to happen.
Well, Cliff spoke from experience.
But whatever.
Cliff was in the Chili Peppers, so he should know.
Well, but he was an early Chili Peppers. Not that that's a pass. But
he also played with me, so I mean, he went from nowhere to space cadet. Amazing musician, doing amazing soundtracks. We still love him.
That's right.
Really amazing. Yeah,
I agree.
So
when you were in the Rollins Band, then you got invited either with Greg Ginn first for Gone. So did you move out to the West Coast or?
I did not. In fact, the Rollins Band actually started here in Trenton.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Really?
Yeah. So because our guitarist came up from, well, he was living in Leeds, but he was from DC. So Henry came east, and we rehearsed in my basement for about a month, and then hit the road for the next few years.
So have you always lived in Trenton?
No, I lived in New York for at least 20 years.
Okay.
Lived Lower East Side, Brooklyn. I did the whole thing. I basically came back here. There was sort of a break in the action, and then I decided to go spend the winter in Bali since there was nothing going on here. And when I came back from that, I moved out of New York, and it was probably precipitous because my mother was starting to suffer from dementia, and she couldn't be left alone for very long, and it seemed like it started to be this pattern of every time I went on tour, when I came home, she was in the hospital or something.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking.
I mean, dementia, because it's still so mysterious and it's so prevalent, and we can only pray that we don't get, I don't know, whatever we're doing, but none of us so far have early onset.
No, thank God.
And we probably won't because we're so active.
Well, no, also they say not only playing music, but even listening actively to music is a good deterrent for even if you are preconditioned to basically slowing down that process.
Right.
And because I'm not an expert on this, but what I've read is like just you're constantly making new connections with the brain, and that's a great way to actually deter that.
So what year did you go to Bali? How long were you there for, and what did you do there? I mean, it must have been amazing. It must have been such a break from everything this country no longer has to offer.
I think it was around 2008. I realized that I could. I think that's when it was. I realized that I could live there cheaper than living anywhere in the States.
Anywhere.
Yeah. It was literally between $5 and $12 a day for a bungalow with a patio and breakfast. And I just went there and sat around, smoked cigarettes, and read books for hours on end.
What books were occupying your time at that period?
Oh.
I mean, did you get into like a genre, or were you just like grab it all and read what you can because you got the time on your hands now?
I'll tell you what, it was kind of odd because everything was super cheap except books in English because they knew that tourists would be starved for them. And they were all used books. So, but, I'm a big Graham Greene fan, so he's a good real go-to for me. It's a simple, entertaining reading for me. And I read that, the biography of E = MC squared. I don't know who wrote that, but, that's pop science. But
and were you playing music?
I was playing. I did a few gigs, and then I
with local musicians or solo.
Yeah, well, they really love blues in Bali. so
okay.
I was and reggae. They're crazy for reggae, but
weird.
Yeah, once you're there, you see it. Tropical Island, there's long hair musicians. You can like, oh, reggae makes sense with these guys.
It makes sense there. Yeah.
But I saw a lot of traditional music, and then I was studying the rindik, which is like a Indonesian balafon. It's like tuned bamboo, to keys, and you play them with rubber mallets. That was really great to do.
It has been very brain refreshing to just be in such a different kind of environment with a different quality of life.
It was amazing because, most people didn't even know my name. I was just some guy that they would see, walking around town.
And people are happier.
Yeah.
Food's better.
Yep. Food was
Beaches
great.
Are clean.
The food was great. They're not really hedonistic, so it wasn't like, I wasn't getting loaded every night. And since it is semi-impoverished, they don't eat much meat. So even a meal that has meat in it, there's not much there. So it was super healthy.
Healthier.
Yeah, really healthy, and cost nothing. So I just kept extending my stay. Like, maybe another couple of weeks.
No, but it's soul cleansing because, especially, in America, we get so caught up in the bullshit that is ever present with every second of every fucking day, especially now.
Yeah.
That to realize, and I think this is the problem with a lot of Americans, is they don't realize there is an alternative reality out there. And
Right.
if you travel, you see that everywhere you go. You see that all over Europe. You see it in South America. You see it in Bali. You see it in Australia, Japan. And people here are just so pathetically patriotic to what is really a crock of shit.
Lydia,
every day.
No, but Lydia, I have to say, not only do people not know, it's actually actively discouraged. Hence, like basically in almost any other country, people are bilingual. Like we're not encouraged to learn another language.
No,
we have to be like
keep
the
them
number one
separated.
superpower.
Yeah, keep them dumb.
The overwhelming majority, in my opinion, of people that start pounding their chest with America's the greatest country, America has the greatest everything, are people who've never been outside of the country.
Right.
And and to address your language thing, I witnessed two Dutch people talking to each other, and one had a British accent and the other had an American, and they were teasing each other about which television show that they watched. And like one watched EastEnders and the other one watched Dynasty or something like that. And all of Dutch TV, on purpose, they don't dub anything. They don't replace dialogue. They give you subtitles so that all the Dutch learn to speak English.
But because the Dutch have such bad taste, no, I'm joking. That's why they watch a lot of English shows. Because you go to Scandinavia, they all have American accents. They actually they mostly watch predominantly American shows. But I'm making a joke, of course.
You watch any TV?
Don't have bad taste.
Do you watch any like brain numbing television just to take a break from reality?
Yeah.
Well, do tell.
I'm a ridiculous ice hockey fan.
Okay.
Oh, you're Canadian, of course.
Yeah.
I'm a nice trucker fan. I understand.
So
Sim Cain, if you can get tickets, or if I can get tickets, and we'll go together, because there's only one hockey match a year I really want to see, which is the NYPD against the fire department, and even Wayne Gretzky flies out into this, and it's basically the cops and firemen pounding each other's faces and it's no longer in Long Island. It's still in Long Island. It's just no longer Nassau Coliseum. It's another one, but that's a match I want to see.
Well, I'm not even going to go into how I feel about that, because you know how I feel about that, Tim. I love it.
Did you play hockey growing up, Sim?
I did. I played, and my dad was the coach, but he was like
whoa, you're really into it. Okay.
Well, he was kind of like a bohemian coach. We were definitely had that Mighty Ducks vibe, or Bad News Bears, because my dad was laughing at the other coaches and they're drafting players and trading. He was like, "This is ridiculous." And so sometimes we'd never win, but it was here's a typical scenario: me telling my dad, like, we could actually win this one, and him going, "Oh, but Kenny hasn't played yet. Kenny, get your ass out there!" And there goes Kenny out on his ankles, falling over, and my dad guffawing with laughter, like, "Hooray!" And then we lose. So
Well, yeah.
He
Who's
was
your
All fun
favorite
and games
NHL team?
until somebody breaks their ankle.
Who's
yeah.
your favorite NHL team? Are the Flyers?
No, Toronto Maple Leafs.
All right. Okay. But Gritty is the best mascot in professional
Gritty
sports, right?
is pretty widely accepted as the best mascot in the
Yeah, exactly.
NHL. No one can hold a candle to that guy.
Well,
So,
yeah.
so Sim, let's get back to the musical aspect of
Yeah.
this game of tiddlywinks we're playing. So, from Rollins and Gone and music in that direction, then you eventually gravitated more towards the New York kind of alt jazz underground, like the John Zorns and Zena Parkins and stuff like that.
That's correct.
And then eventually to just blues. So it's actually almost as if you're decelerating and having to find another way of putting your propulsion and energy into a different form of music.
I was doing it all at once, but at one point. So, whenever
it's probably helpful.
Yeah, at that point, I loved it. Playing in so many diverse contexts is what kept it all interesting to me. Right. And if I couldn't have done that, I'm sure I would have gotten bored. But I moved to New York, I guess, in '91, and I was playing a lot with Marc Ribot, and I did some Zorn gigs at the time. But I ended up touring with Ribot. And then, oddly enough, I joined the Jay Giles band.
That's
well, why not?
How did you get that? Because that's a Boston band. How did you even? What happened there?
I had done a recording session with the Uptown Horns. They're from New York, and it was like a mock jukebox for a movie that I don't even think I think it got made but never widely released. And so I don't know, 6 months, 8 months later, I met the keyboard player from Jay Giles at a party.
Seth
Justman.
Seth Justman, yeah.
It was at a party for a mutual friend who had taken his bar exam. And so we chatted at that. And then, I don't know, another 6 months later, they were going to reunite for the first time in 17, 20 years or something. And it was all the original members except the drummer. So they asked it was like a weird confluence. They asked Seth for a recommendation. I'm sorry, Seth asked the Uptown Horns, and they said, well, we worked with this guy on this record. He might be good for it. And then that night, coincidentally, the Rollins Band played on SNL. And
I never knew that. Wow,
yeah.
Now, is that a comedy routine or is it deadly serious?
It's pathetically serious.
I'm sure it was.
So the next day, Magic Dick, the harmonica player,
yeah,
he called up Seth and said, "I just saw this drummer on SNL last night. We should get that guy."
And that's a big gig, playing on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Come on, it's a big gig.
Well,
who was the host of that show?
Pamela Anderson.
Amazing! Oh my God!
I made sure to plant. I made sure to plant one on her at the curtain call. Tommy Lee was there.
Ooh, should have planted one on him too. I'm sure it could have been a wonderful way if you could have afforded the extra baggage, Tommy Lee.
I met him backstage at that show, and he was such a quintessential SoCal surf guy. He was like, "Dude, you're awesome."
Yeah. Sometimes the cuter they are, the dumber they are. You just got to accept it. I have my whole life. What can I say? So something you got to deal with. Although I think Pam Anderson has, come out from her history into something. Well, I don't know.
She seems a lot more interesting.
She had to take the makeup off eventually.
Yeah,
she still likes Bad Boys. Julian Assange. She just she likes Bad Boys. That's her thing.
She's also Canadian.
She is. Vancouver's a different thing, though.
Different
thing. But she was discovered at a hockey game.
Vancouver at this point.
She was discovered at a hockey game on the Jumbotron, and she got that's her story.
They would need a Jumbotron to get those tits in there. I'm just saying.
So basically, Seth Justman had you've been recommended from two different angles to Seth, is what you're saying, right?
Right.
But Peter Wolf, he was pretty cool, no?
He was really cool. I didn't know what to expect, but it turned out pretty okay.
Yeah.
What about Jay Giles himself, the guitar player?
He was grumpy. They all loved me, so I was in a very good position. And Peter himself even mentioned it. He took me aside one day and he said, "I don't know how you do this because this band is like the Jews and the Palestinians." But he said, "You somehow managed to not upset anyone. They all love you." So I was like, "All right, I'll take that." But there's nothing.
That's you, the peacemaker.
Yeah, that was.
But the band,
he's through better drumming. Yeah.
The band was all not that it matters. The band was all Jews except for the drummer that they fired. Right? He was like Irish or something.
Yeah, they didn't fire him. I think he was the only one that grew up.
were there other mainstream rock groups that were like then volleying for your attention at that point?
Well, I'd been flown out to Chicago for a Nine Inch Nails audition, but I didn't know. This is how stupid I was at the time. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. In fact, I don't know why, but I just kind of feel like doing
I don't blame you.
I feel like I'd rather do the Giles gig, which was like Sam and Dave on methamphetamine. It was.
Well, but if you're a drum set player, I mean, you're playing Nine Inch Nails, you're playing karaoke, and you're playing so many backing tracks.
Yeah,
and Jay Giles, you're in a fucking bar rock band.
Hey, look, let's face it, we all like to be in a good bar band every now and then. I've done it, Tim's done it, you've done it. It's just something that has to be done because it's fun.
Yeah, I would. It was crazy. They rehearsed 8 weeks for a 6-week tour, and they would fly me up from Brooklyn every Monday and put me in a hotel. I would rehearse every weekday and then fly home on Friday.
Why did they need so much fucking rehearsal? I thought they were professional musicians. Jesus.
Well, this is pretty amazing because they hadn't played together in over a decade, and
you forget.
Yeah, and the level, the scale of musicianship in that band was amazing. You had it went from barely knowing how to play to a virtuoso. And
hence the rehearsals for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
I have to say 8 hours total is, I think, the most rehearsal I've ever had for anything, but I'm not in Jay Giles, nor will I ever.
Well, they explained it to me. They're like, we're a Showtime band, so there's some marks you gotta hit. I was like, all right.
Right. Sure. They had to hit them because they didn't know who they were fucking dealing with, which was you.
Yeah, totally. But it's kind of like, if you play that fill, we won't know where to hit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, fun, but kind of boring.
Well, that's the thing with yep. When you're a rhythm section player that's allowed to go off and express themselves, as opposed to one that literally has to be an anchor or they're fucked.
I mean, I had moments, but then there was other moments where I really had to hit the mark for them, But I also, there's another tidbit about him, is I believe I'm the first musician to ever play in the Jay Giles band that actually counted off a song. Because we'd be rehearsing and they'd be like, okay, let's try that again. And they'd all sort of look at each other and it was like someone cranking up an old Model D Ford or something. They sort of just all kind of fall in. And then I started counting it off and I realized it was part of the power struggle in the band. They were like, oh, okay, yeah, we're willing to let the new guy do it. So, so that it doesn't seem like I'm being a boss,
But Seth was the main arranger. Seth was the main arranger, right? Or at least late stage success. Jay Giles. When I look at the credits, I think he got, with his budget, got like a Fairlight or some kind of early digital audio workstation, and basically just arranged the whole fucking album. They ought to learn the shit, right?
Well, apparently the story goes, Peter Wolf married Faye Dunaway and moved to Hollywood.
Let me stop you there for 1 minute. Beautiful women marry ugly men all the time, but ugly women never marry beautiful men because obviously they just fucking don't. Hey, Dunaway, but I'm sure she must have been.
Well,
she was.
Eddie Davis must have had nothing on Faye Dunaway. By all accounts, she was a party animal. Nice. Oh yeah.
So while he was out,
she was more Tallulah Bankhead. I'd love to see her naked at a Jay Giles party. All I'm saying.
Some real Kenneth Anger stuff going on here. But he so when he was out there in Hollywood, Seth started working on the new record, which was their Freeze Frame, which was their biggest record. And Peter explained to me that he was under the impression that they were like Lennon and McCartney, that they'd share everything. So when he came back and they were doing the publishing, Seth was like, "Oh, I wrote all of this. I'm not sharing this with you." So
that's fair.
Yeah, but Peter never wanted to do any of the new songs. Like, these are the songs that made you world famous, and he wants to do stuff from before that, But,
Flamethrower is the best song on that record.
When you were a 5 to 12-year-old, what, Tim? Go ahead.
I said Flamethrower. I'm not even a Jay Giles buff, but I just know this. Flamethrower is the best song on that record.
Yeah,
and it's kind of like a post Tattoo You-ish kind of party vibe. Not the
to me, it was closest they got to like the no wave funk. Like they remind me a little bit of remember Noise R Us video? Do you remember
Noise R Us?
Yeah, they were fantastic.
I'm glad you see the comparison, but as a 5 to 12-year-old drummer, what did you start getting into musically at that age? Like, did you have like an older cousin, older brother, whatever? Like, or did you have musical taste all over the place?
I have my older brother. He's a saxophone player, so he was really into the jazz thing. And my parents, they separated when I was 7, so my mom's house was all like soul and R&B and jazz, and someone dumped like some radio station's old jazz catalog in the house. So so much shit to go through. It was all pretty badly scratched, but there was some really rare Miles recordings and all that kind of stuff. And my dad was a musician too, but it was jazz. There was little to no rock and roll in the house when I was growing up. Little bits here and there, but it was basically not until, I don't know, high school or something.
So then what did you break into in high school then? And how'd you go from mom and dad's jazz massive collection to like whatever you went into? What was the genre you went into?
Well, the closest I had gotten to rock before that was Savoy Brown. My uncle was the manager of Savoy Brown, so I had that stuff around, and that was like the blues rock. But what did I get into? Really, when I first started in high school, we were all about shit like Earth, Wind and Fire, and Chicago horn bands and funk bands, and then a lot of my friends were listening to things. Led Zeppelin and that sort of stuff. But I was getting into the fusion at that point. I liked, Billy Cobham and Mahavishnu Orchestra and all that.
So that's the thing. Sim, I talked to Lydia about this. For rhythm section players, if you're curious and you develop your thing, it's almost impossible. And you were talking about this earlier about like, well, you're doing all these things at the same time. That's what kept you going. It's hard to have a very focused aesthetic commitment when your brain soaking in all this information. If you can actually do it, you start getting hungry for it. You want all that, and rhythm section players get the opportunities that other instruments don't really.
Right. Yep.
Did you ever play jazz? I mean, did you ever play like swing feels or any of that stuff? You can, but
that. When I went to high school, there was the music department in my high school was kind of on a college level, and they had a stage band that actually had real improvisers in it, guys that could really play, and we had no marching band, so we would set up risers next to the football field on Saturdays and do it Johnny Carson style. So there was a lot of that kind of the big band jazz and Maynard Ferguson type shit, but then certainly, my brother was a straight ahead player, so occasionally I'd play with him. And then just this past few years, I've been playing in a pretty straight ahead jazz band with it's just 2 horns, acoustic bass and drums. There's no like guitar or piano.
Yeah, cool.
And it's tremendously challenging because we're doing shit like I don't know, Thelonious Monk, brilliant corners or whatever, that doesn't have a standard form. You're not going in 8-bar phrases. And since there's no one playing that chord that lets we're at the bridge, You have to keep your space. You have to maintain where you are in the form of the song without any help.
But you like that. You're a drummer. You drummers like that's a flex that drummers like to do,
right? It's at best it's a flex. At worst it's a train wreck.
I mean, you can
No,
fucking
but
do
also
whatever
there's been scientific studies about how the brains of improvisers are different. Than it's a different brain chemical
Yeah.
that allows you, if you're free enough, to improvise, as opposed to just playing the same freaking rock songs night after night, which becomes absolutely fucking tedious for anybody.
It
But
does.
the brains of improvisers scientifically are actually very different, and you have to have a sense of not only confidence, looseness, awareness, freedom, and paying attention. I mean, as opposed to rock where you just, okay, you know the shit. Go ahead, another 100 times.
Yeah, it's almost like a meditation where you have to be right in the moment. And whereas in some rock things, especially harkening back to playing much larger places, like Tim was mentioning earlier, there are times where instead of like, I'm just going to improvise this next fill, I know that I have to set something up. And, way back in the day, sometimes I'd start saying in my head, okay, big fill, like play something big here. And there you're thinking ahead. You're not playing in the moment anymore. But as soon as you start playing in the past, like I shouldn't have done that, you're fucked.
You're done. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, improvisers. I mean, like a rock band, because they're different satisfactions, right? And a rock band hitting the marks and nailing it is kind of like a modern military. You do your job and you go in there, and the improv is like old school fighting. It's motion to motion. It's gesture to gesture. It's survival.
Well, and when it works amazing, it's another dimension.
Oh,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
another dimension.
Yeah.
And as opposed to just regimentated same songs every night after night, it's a different dimension that one traverses to.
And the thing is, with the improv, there are no mistakes. It's how you follow.
I feel there are no mistakes anyway, because whatever, just fill in the blank.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's what you follow with, and if there are any kind of moments of, oh boy, where's this going? A brilliant musician can turn into something more magical than they even originally intended. So it's that's.
I have to say, my best lesson in music was doing early improvisational stuff that I thought was the most dreadful thing. I'm ready to shoot myself, and then the next night, the most brilliant thing that it could never be reproduced again. And that was a really good education and what works and what doesn't, because it's a mystery sometimes what works and what doesn't. You're either there with others or you're all on different planets, and both can be incredible, or it can be the most hideous thing you've ever fucking created in your life. That's a really good lesson.
Yeah, and also to be able to walk away from it when you're done instead of like dwell on it. Because I have to admit, when I very first arrived in New York and I was playing some free prov shows with your Zorn and Ribot types, and the audience is sitting there dead still and silent, I started feeling incredibly self-conscious and very hot under the collar, like, oh my God, we are just dying up here. And then you stop and they'd all like applaud rapturously. Like, oh.
Well, you see, I love the response of dead silence. I actually command it in a lot of my gigs because I know what I'm doing. I'm impregnating, and the response is irrelevant. I don't need a Pavlovian set of puppies clamoring with their paws together, but I understand your dilemma.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. All I was saying was it was just a matter of surprise when they applauded. I was like, oh, they didn't hate it,
Yeah.
But,
I don't know. Is it better than 100 jocks in their underwear slobbering all over you? I'm not sure. Wait a minute. I might not be such a bad night after all.
Yeah, that was kind of like a Rollins gig.
So first of all, you are a drummer and a successful one, and you played hockey. So it's pretty much guaranteed that you're competitive.
Yeah, I don't find that the competitiveness in music never really served me very well.
Okay. When you have no competition, you stand above it. So hello, you got no competition. Well, you stand alone, but with others. That's what.
No, it's a cliche because drummers can vibe each other. They really kind of.
They really do.
It's kind of weird.
They're like the jocks of the band or something, and there's a lot of competitiveness there. It just doesn't feel good, and I I never really liked it. I had a really good drummer, or a guy I considered a very good drummer friend. I'd known him for years, and I remember describing our relationship as totally non-competitive and how refreshing it was. And then after knowing him for years one night, he said, I always thought you and I had like a competitive vibe. And I was I was like, man, what the fuck?
Yeah, you ruined it. You ruined it.
You ruined it. Yeah.
I think bass players were the least. I mean, there's competition, but we're the least vibey with each other. Because when we get alone together, we just give trade secrets. So like, okay, that's how that goes.
I've admired that trait in bass players, the ability to really celebrate another bass player, as opposed to, a lot of drummers look at a different drummer and think about, can I do that? Or would I be able to pull that off? Is that something I could do? Or I can do that, I could, so that doesn't really help anyone.
When female vocalists get together, we often trade boyfriends, ex-lovers, dirty secrets, just saying, oh, why don't you take them now? I've had enough, or not enough, just saying. Different kind of
was there a drummer? Was there a drummer in your formative experiences as a young drummer? Was there a drummer that you witnessed live that just changed your perception and the possibility?
Well, of course, I used to see Buddy Rich on TV.
Yeah,
that was totally, my little head exploded. And then I saw him live twice, but both times he didn't take one of his solos. So
weird.
Yeah, he was very temperamental, so it was a little frustrating for me. But it was a lot of the jazz guys that I really loved Art Blakey, and when I saw Billy Cobham, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, back then he was like a superhuman.
Right.
But
Tony Williams, did you ever see him live?
Nope. But I was a late bloomer to Tony, but once I realized his greatness, I just couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Yeah, it's insane. Insane.
Yeah. But he was
reinvented that thing, yeah.
Yeah, he can be pretty competitive, Tony.
Oh, yeah.
So what's coming up next, Sim Cain? Man of many drum stools, many different styles, from West Coast hard grind, hard rock, Rollins, Greg Ginn, to John Zorn, Marc Ribot, to Bali, to God knows whatever. What's the next thing on your plate? And I'm sure there's, and do you pursue? Do people come to you? How do you what happens with you? People come to you, they seek you out. Tim Dahl sought you out.
Yeah, for the most part, or it's an old friend. We're like, oh, we should do something. But my whole business model changed pretty drastically around COVID time, when it went from I was playing constantly, and I was actually getting kind of burnt from it, and then I wasn't doing anything at all. And since then, not much has come back, because like so many of the people I was working with, they either died or went to rehab or retired, and then so I don't play live as much as I used to, and I don't mind it. A few times a month is about how much I want to do it, but I've been doing some more recording stuff.
And that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing. No actual names to drop here, except that I'm doing something with Tim. But,
and Kawabata Makoto. It's going to be an interesting show. I'm psyched about that. And thanks for doing that, by the way.
Oh, sure. Yeah. One of the things though is that I kept finding myself in bands that were tireless, that were full of tireless self-promoters, and that really wasn't my thing. I saw someone talking about Keith Moon being a good gang member or something like that, and I was like, I can relate to that. I was always a much better gang member than a promoter or a businessman. So
well, gang member bands are better. Right? Yeah. I mean, if it's a fucking real Motley Crue, I mean, that's exciting, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. You never get your first band back either, and that's where the camaraderie is. But speaking of that, and speaking of Tony Williams, he was apparently blown away by the Ramones. He thought those drummers were unbelievable.
He was excited. Oh, Sim, I don't know if you know this. Marty Rev from Suicide claims that those two were rolling for a second, and he has demos where they were kind of experimenting with a band, Martin Rev and Tony Williams. And yeah, I've never heard him, but he claims he has those. So he was kind of hanging around and checking shit out.
Oh, he definitely was. He definitely was. And then he was, towards the end of his life, he was trying to get in on the grunge thing. He was rehearsing a rock band.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was rehearsing a rock band that several of my friends and people I played. Actually, Melvin was out there doing it. And then I used to share a house with this guy, Mark Anthony Thompson, who had an act called The Chocolate Genius, and he was singing on it, but he said that the lyrics were so horrible that he was having trouble continuing with the band. But nothing ever came.
You got to know when to have an instrumental and when to have a vocalist. But look, the issue is this, Sim Cain, which is why you're on this podcast, Lydia and Spin, with Lydia Lunchington. We are stubborn, independent, relentless, not going anywhere except road dogging occasionally, recording whatever we feel like, performing with who we want to. And that's why we come together on this, the connective tissue called Lydia and Spin. And I thank you so much for joining us, my friend.
Thank you both very much. Yeah, we're all lifers. So there we go.
Thanks for the memories.
Yeah.
Yes. What's our date again?
It's
what date is that?
November 9th.
At Philly Mocha.
November
9th. On the 9th.
9th, right?
Yeah.
November 9th, Philadelphia, the Mausoleum of Contemporary Art.